All right, today I'm going to talk about whether $2 million is enough to retire comfortably at age 57 or around age 57 after going through hundreds of retirement cases and doing a deep dive into the academic research so you don't have to. I've found that the answer here depends on several critical factors. If you haven't watched the channel before, my name is Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where we work with clients from all across the country, helping them retire and helping them make smart financial decisions. And today I'm going to show you the real data behind the $2 million portfolio and why that might be the sweet spot for early retirement. We'll highlight which factors determine retirement adequacy, and we'll show you some strategies in dealing with withdrawals, how to make the portfolio last, all that good stuff. Let's dig right into it. Okay, now we have a lot of data that consistently indicates a 3 to 4% withdrawal rate is highly sustainable, yielding success probabilities typically exceeding about 90%. And now, of course, how your money's invested is going to play a big part in that, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But compared to the median retirement savings number in America, which is about $250,000, obviously $2 million seems like that should be definitely more than enough. But a lot of these studies as well emphasize that proper management and withdrawal strategies are key to maximizing that portfolio longevity. So one study I like to look at is called the Trinity Study, where researchers analyzed about 100 years of U.S. stock and bond market data and history to understand how different withdrawal rates impact retirement success. In another major study, Javier Estrada expanded on this by studying global markets. And his research emphasized that adding some flexibility to spending, like adjusting withdrawals slightly during market downturns, that can dramatically improve the chances that your portfolio will last throughout retirement, especially over longer time periods. And both the Trinity Study and Estrada's research confirm that $2 million can comfortably support a 30-plus year retirement horizon with a moderate withdrawal rate. Now, let's examine some realistic case studies using some Monte Carlo analysis where we run 1,000 or 10,000 trials, and with some of the academic literature that I just referenced previously to illustrate why $2 million is probably sufficient and is likely the sweet spot for those retiring at around age 57. And so for the first case study, we'll look at a 3% withdrawal, and that's going to be $60,000 off of the $2 million. And in these studies, what they did was they took that withdrawal, that initial withdrawal of $60,000, and then increase that every year for inflation. So the $60,000 would go to $62,000 or $64,300 and so on and so forth. So they're starting, the 3% starts at the beginning of the withdrawal period, and that amount gets increased every year with inflation. So it's not, you're not taking exactly 3% of the whole portfolio every year. You're starting with 3% of the original value, and then that amount gets bumped up with inflation every year. So just wanted to clarify that for the study part and for what we're doing in the case study. So according to the Trinity Study that I referenced earlier, a 3% withdrawal from a $2 million portfolio, $60,000 per year for a 35 to 40 year retirement horizon starting at age 57 still produces about a 92 to 95% success probability. And now this is usually looking at your standard mix of retiree mix of 60% stocks, 40% bonds, or what we might call a 60-40. Now, is that the optimal allocation? Well, I'll touch on that here in a second. But this conservative spending level provides strong safety, even accounting for a longer retirement, and it aligns closely with typical retiree spending. Now let's look at case study number 2. We'll bump this up to a 4% withdrawal. So that'll be $80,000 annually. And again, we're starting with 4% initially of that $2 million. So the first year it's going to be $80,000, and that amount's going to go up with inflation. So with a 4% withdrawal, the Trinity Study and even a recent Vanguard research study show success probabilities of around 82 to 87% when modeling for 35 to 40 year retirement periods starting at age 57. And so this should allow for a pretty comfortable lifestyle while maintaining relatively high odds of portfolio longevity with some modest flexibility during down market. Okay, so now for case study number 3, we're gonna bump this up a little bit to a 5% withdrawal, and that's $100,000 annually. At a 5% withdrawal rate over a 35 to 40 year time horizon, success probabilities drop to approximately 65 to 72%. Of course, makes sense. You have much higher withdrawal rate, long period of time if you're starting at around age 57. So there's a lot more that could theoretically go wrong. But this withdrawal rate can still work for retirees who are willing to reduce spending slightly during downturns, or they have backup assets, or they're willing to just be very flexible. Maybe they don't always need to take withdrawals. And now you might have heard some of the probabilities in these case studies and think, well, 92 or 95%, Justin, that's not good enough for me. I want 100%. Well, before you worry about having a perfect plan, here's why you don't actually need a 100% success rate to retire confidently. As I touched on above, in both the Trinity Study and Estrada's research, withdrawals were based on a constant initial withdrawal rate, like 3 or 4%, applied to the starting portfolio value. Each year, that amount's increased for inflation, regardless of whether markets were up or whether that they were down. And these were considered rigid withdrawal strategies. So the retirees kept spending that inflation-adjusted amount even during market crashes, which in my experience is not very realistic. Usually an adjustment's going to be made in there somewhere. No spending flexibility was assumed, making the results very, very conservative compared to how real retirees actually behave in retirement. In reality, retirees often adjust naturally. They'll cut spending back a bit during tough markets, or maybe their spending will decline as retirement goes on. I've talked before about how a lot of retiree spending will follow a smile curve. It'll be higher at the beginning, it'll start to go down throughout retirement a little bit, and then might come back up at the end for healthcare costs. So there's lots of variability there. And a 100% success rate would mean that your plan survives even in the worst historical market conditions possible, like another Great Depression, going through a period like that and continuing to take inflation-adjusted withdrawals, which just isn't very realistic. If markets perform poorly, you can always adjust by delaying large expenses, reducing withdrawals some in certain years. That's what we might call guardrails, or tweaking the investment mix. And because of this built-in flexibility, or what should be built-in flexibility, a success rate between 85 to 95% is still considered very strong and practical for retirement planning. Now, retirement success, it's not about achieving perfection. In fact, I found that people with perfectionist tendencies can tend to really hurt themselves and delay retirement a lot longer than they actually should. So it's really about creating a plan that's adaptable, resilient, and realistic. And these realistic and research-backed case studies just reinforce that the $2 million portfolio mark can comfortably sustain retirement from age 57, assuming proper strategies and spending discipline is in place. So if you're around 57 and you have somewhere close to $2 million saved for retirement, and you're contemplating retiring early, maybe you're on the fence about it, you have some questions, if you want a personalized assessment, just check out the link below the video. Click on that, it'll take you to a quick questionnaire. It's totally free. I'll send you back a personalized video breaking down exactly what you need for a secure retirement. And now that we covered what the data shows about how long your money can last, let's look at some strategies to ensure that that $2 million does last throughout your retirement. So first up, the most critical is making sure that you have a sustainable withdrawal rate. So you want to prioritize a withdrawal rate somewhere around 3 to 4% to start with, to substantially increase portfolio longevity. And now, as I showed in the case study, maybe you can go up to 5. And now some years you can actually go higher than that. I've worked with retirees where we started with a much higher portfolio withdrawal rate and then started to tailor it down. So there's a lot of different ways to actually approach it, and that's where good planning comes in. But I would say somewhere around 3 to 4% to start with is a good benchmark. The second one is tax efficiency, and I really like this one. Strategic tax planning, including stuff like Roth conversions, asset allocation, asset location. These can meaningfully extend the life of your portfolio and let you keep more of your money by reducing what we call the tax drag on it. So getting some of these factors correct, especially if you have a large portfolio like 2 million, and assuming most of it is all pre-tax money, like a pre-tax 401k or traditional IRA, at some point you're going to have very, very large RMDs that you will need to plan for that could come along and kick you up into a higher tax bracket. So getting the tax planning part done correctly is going to be a big factor and potentially saving you a lot of money down the road. The next one is having a flexible spending and investment strategy. So instead of sticking to a rigid withdrawal amount every year, you could consider adjusting your spending based on how the market and how your portfolio are doing. So research by Forsyth, Vetzal, and Westmacott, I hope I'm getting that correct, shows a dynamic approach where you can tweak your spending and your investment mix as conditions change, can help maximize your lifetime withdrawals and lower the risk of running out of money. It's a smarter, more realistic, and more flexible way to navigate retirement. I like to approach retirement withdrawals in this manner, where we're actually looking at what's going on every single year and then tailoring our withdrawals accordingly. And now, last but not least, extremely important, your investment allocation for longevity, making sure that you're investing with that in mind. So maintaining appropriate equity or stock market exposure that can support long-term growth, get above inflation, preserve your purchasing power, critically important. I find retirement portfolios often become overly conservative way too quickly, which can ironically increase your risk of running out of money over a long retirement, especially when you're retiring early. If we go back to Estrada's study, he actually found that the sustainable withdrawal rate increases the more stock exposure, or what we call equity exposure, there is inside the portfolio. They found that more aggressive allocations deliver higher long-term returns, which translate into higher withdrawals. And the example they looked at, just moving from a 40% stock, 60% bond portfolio to the opposite, that would allow a retiree to increase their average sustainable withdrawal by almost 8% in the international market portfolio and over 10% in the US market portfolio. So this just shows that you got to be careful about being just too reflexively conservative automatically, especially right out of the gate in retirement. You're going to need some kind of equity or stock market exposure to retain your purchasing power and stay over inflation. So now that you understand some of these portfolio sustainability strategies, let's look at how to actually implement the approach that can best fit your needs. So number one, determine that safe withdrawal rate. And that's going to be personalized to your lifestyle and risk tolerance. I think probably the most important factor in retirement planning is getting your monthly expenses, or annual, but broken down monthly is more realistic, getting those expenses as accurate as possible before you retire. That'll let you calculate that strategic withdrawal rate most accurately and make sure that you're accounting for everything. And if there's other things that you want to do, for example, take a couple vacations during a year or something like that, include that into some of the monthly expenses. That'll make that strategic withdrawal rate even better, or more accurate, I would say, to account for all the expenses. Next, you want to identify and incorporate the critical factors that are overlooked by standard retirement calculators, like taxes. So remember, if all your retirement is pre-tax, especially if you have $2 million, you're looking at reducing that by at least 12, maybe to 22 or 24% when you factor in the taxes that are going to come off of it. So make sure that you're taking taxes into account when you're figuring out how much you need to withdraw and how much you're actually going to net. And lastly, you want to implement an ongoing monitoring system to assess and adjust your portfolio based either on market conditions or, more realistically, personal circumstances. And that monitoring part is what I find most critical. Now, there's all kinds of ways that you can go and look at retirement numbers or plug numbers into a spreadsheet or even financial planning software, but all those do is really give you a hypothetical snapshot at one point in time, or just a projection. It doesn't show you how to make adjustments based on what's going on in your life in year 5, year 7, year 10. So that's where the value of good planning, I think, comes in and makes that monitoring step the most important one. So now that you've seen how $2 million is right about the sweet spot for early retirement, somewhere around 57 for most people, you can maybe get off the fence about retiring early if that's something that you really want to do. So if you're giving up precious time working extra years that you don't have to because you're thinking that, man, maybe I don't know if I'll have enough, and if you're not sure about it, just click the link in the description. Let me know how I can help. Fill out the questionnaire. I'll send you a personalized video giving you my thoughts on your situation and see what we can do to improve on that. If I can help, happy to do it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.